Okay, so you're looking to get started in heating your home with firewood. How much do you need? I think that's the most important question you can ask, no matter where you plan to get your firewood, no matter if you plan to buy it already cut and split, or if you're going to buy rounds and split them yourself, or even take down your own trees and cut those into rounds and split it all yourself. You've got to know how much you need. So what I recommend doing, and what I did, is I first found someone I knew already heated with firewood in my region. And I asked them, how much do you plan on having every winter? And that friend told me that they always plan on using 3 cords every winter. They said it was more than they needed, but they never wanted to have to worry about being short. I knew that that friend had a smaller house than I did, but they're in my region, so I could still use that number. I figure if they wanted to have 3 to be safe, then I'm probably going to need 3 minimum. And so I planned to fill this woodshed here that holds 3.5 cords. I nearly had it filled. Winter came and I had started restocking it midwinter and found that I even had to dig into that new restocked supply. So the best thing you can do is go ahead and get more than you think you need for that first year especially, and that way you can accurately measure out how much you ended up using and then go from there for figuring out future year's needs. And what I do here, I've got a 3.5 cord woodshed, I've got a 2.5 cord woodshed, and I have plans to make another one on this side as soon as the ash here that's in the way is gone, and then I'll be able to make that woodshed here connected into this one or just next to this one. And currently it's just only the front half of this actually has wood to it. So essentially right now I have the capacity to have 6 cords of wood that's covered, and then another 1.25 cords out here on the side. But I'll be able to do this pallets, the 3 pallets here, over here next time, and not get in the way of this hickory tree. So that would give me a good 8.5 cords, and that I think is the safety margin I want. I'm going to get a more accurate measure this year now that I have more than I need. So I can get a more accurate measure of how much did I actually use, because it is hard to keep a good measurement of what you're using when you're starting to use what you've stored up during the winter and you don't have it set out. So definitely recommend getting more than you think you need, getting an estimate on what you need from a friend in the area who has maybe a similar sized house, or take what they do and make it proportional to the size house you have and figure out what your need might be based on that. And then just make sure you have figured out how much you have, and then write down how much you have at spring that you didn't cut in the winter. That way you can get a good accurate count of how much you're going to need each year. With the 8.5 cords, I plan to always have double what I need, and I will add additional storage space if I need it in order to make sure I can keep about 2 years worth of wood stored up. That way I'm never stressed in the springtime to make sure that I'm quickly getting everything cut for the following winter, but that I've got stuff that's well seasoned and ready for us to be able to use the coming winter that's already drying, and I'm working on then that next winter supply. You also never quite know how much you're gonna be able to have time to cut down. If you're like us, you've got fruit trees and gardening that you like to do as well. And sometimes those things, at least in the moment, they feel more urgent. And so you try and get those done and you realize you don't have the stock that you need. So I can just kind of avoid that and try and play catch up in the winter time with any stock I need to fill up. And then I'm not worrying about trying to find already dead trees that would dry very quickly or dry while sitting next to the wood stove in the winter, which is obviously not a preferred way of doing things. Also, there are certain types of woods that take a lot longer to dry out than others. I've got cherry and ash, which are both woods that have a relatively low moisture content. I've got a moisture meter that I use, and I was splitting some cherry here, this inner spot here. Those are all freshly cut about a week ago, and when I cut those I measured somewhere around 24 or 25% moisture. You're gonna want under 20% for sure when you're burning, but if you can get closer to 10% moisture or so, you're gonna look a lot better, and you're not going to feel like you're using as much fuel to get the same amount of warmth. So you're gonna get more bang for your buck, essentially, on all of the wood that you're burning if you've got it dried out sufficiently. But some woods, such as oak, have a lot higher moisture content, closer to a 40 or a 50%, and they're gonna usually take even 2 seasons to dry out. And of course, the further north you are and the less of those dry summer days that you have, it's probably going to take even longer to get your wood to dry out. So I recommend trying to get a couple different types of trees. Check their moisture content when you're splitting them initially, especially if they were cut and they were alive, and write down those numbers so you can get a better gauge of how well they dry out and how long it takes them to dry out as your season progresses. That way you can get a better idea of what you need to restock next. If, say, you ran low after your year, you've only got a year to let things dry out, you know what woods to look for. And then if you're looking to stock up, you can be more flexible and just kind of take down any trees that are troublesome in your woods or troublesome for neighbors who maybe have had them fall and need assistance getting them up and aren't interested in the firewood themselves. But you get a lot more flexibility, especially if you have the option of saving up for that next winter and not the one that's about to happen. So give yourself some flexibility. Make sure that you always plan for extra, especially when you're first starting out. And of course, if you had any sort of health issues, or maybe you had to be gone for work for a long time, away from home, or traveling for other reasons, all sorts of different reasons can get in the way of making sure you have that next year's wood supply. So it's just a good idea to plan around that by making sure you have a lot extra. As long as you have your wood stored correctly, you've got to lift it off the ground. You're not going to lose it to rot. If you've got rounds that you've got to store and you can't get to splitting them quickly, I'd recommend taking ones that still have bark and laying those on the ground first and stacking others on top of that. That way that bark gives you that extra layer of protection against that moisture buildup on the ground. It's summer right now, so I'm not overly concerned. These rounds on this side here, I'm not sure what type of tree it is, but they've actually been splitting rather easily, so I should be able to get those split before we get any significant rains. And then these cherry ones are drying out. They've still got bark and sapwood. I'm not worried about them, since I know I'll be able to get to them relatively soon. Ones out here that have certain issues, decay in different parts of them, those I'm a little more concerned with getting split up and stacked, but I am running out of room, so I'm gonna have to do some prioritization as to what I split and when, unless I wanna have to get on taking down that ash tree sooner than I had anticipated. But really the only logs that are going to be in true danger immediately, at least, are going to be the set of logs that you've got along the bottom. And what I did even last year is I just took some red brick I had laying around, laid some T-posts along those, and I rolled my rounds onto those. I also took some old boards that were painted boards and rolled those rounds on top of those boards that were held up by bricks as well. And that kept both those boards and the rounds from collecting too much moisture, and that was easy to do. I may do that again if I run out of space to put this lumber, but I've still got some space to fill, so we're not there yet. You can also just lay down some pallets. If you've got access to some pallets, just lay a few down and roll your rounds onto those pallets and keep them off the ground, and that'll be a good way to store those as well. Well, I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.